let's just go ahead and start. Welcome all of the participants for being with us here today. And thank you, Sridhar, for hosting us. And Edith, I'm so excited to do this interview with you today. I've enjoyed getting to know you through the new member nominations and induction process. Hopefully we will officially induct you on August the 29th as planned, but who knows what the plan will be by then. I just want to start the interview, first of all, by saying thank you again to Sridhar eBiz for sponsoring this and for setting us all up, and our other sponsors, Paragon Bank and Behind the Scenes, who always do everything for us to support us. So we really appreciate that. Edith, let's just go ahead and get started. And just first question I always want to ask everybody is, tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. How did you start? Where did you grow up? What kind of experiences did you have that led you to the path that you're on now?
Well, first, Kirsten, let me just thank you for this opportunity. I know it's been quite challenging for you to try to make this happen. So finally, we are successful here. I grew up in Oxford, Mississippi. I was born and raised there. I went to school at Ole Miss, undergrad, and I grew up with my grandmother. It was just the two of us. My grandmother only had a 6th grade education, but she knew the power of education, and she always wanted me to go to college and wanted me to be a teacher, which was one of the few professions that an African-American female could have at the time that I was growing up. In fact, my grandmother never knew what I did as a CPA. She had no idea what I did, but what she didn't know is I didn't have to move back home, and I was able to give her money versus vice versa. So in high school, probably my first entrepreneurial initiative or job was typing for a university professor. Now that was all with the little pet, the old-fashioned, not the old-fashioned at the time, it was top-of-the-line typewriters, but that was my first job. But I ended up at FedEx after I got out of school and had done a stint at Deloitte in public accounting. And FedEx to me is the ultimate in entrepreneurship. Although I didn't know that at the time, we didn't know that was what we were doing. There was just always something new, something being developed, some questions to be answered or some work to be done. And it was new to all of us, and it was a lot of fun. So I got my entrepreneurial experience within the safety of a large organization like FedEx.
That's awesome. That's great. You know, I know that because you didn't have, who were your role models? Did you have anybody that really influenced you as you were going through and starting your career? It was all new at FedEx, so how did you have anybody that kind of helped you and guided you through the way?
Well, my grandmother basically was the first role model I had. And, we didn't call them role models. My grandmother was honest. She was an entrepreneur of sorts herself. She would wash shirts, wash and starch and iron shirts for university students. And at the time when you went to class, you may have worn a tie, but they would bring their shirts to the house. She would wash them, iron them, and then they would come and pick them up. So that was the first, again, probably introduction. Again, I didn't know that was what it was. And my grandmother was an honest person, a hardworking person, which I think are all attributes of a good entrepreneur. And she was motivated to do what needed to be done to make it happen, to provide for her family, who were basically just the two of us. But she had no other option. She did work as a maid on campus, but she also had these side gigs. And then the final thing is in giving back. She always found a way to give something back to family, friends. Generally, it was clothing or some kind of food. And by working on campus, oftentimes the people she worked for gave her clothing that they didn't want anymore, and then she would get it allocated to other people in the community who needed it. So that philanthropic perspective or part of her has always stuck with me too, and I think is also a critical part of any entrepreneur.
Totally agree. Well, that's really cool. I'm glad that what an amazing woman to grow up with. That's a great role model. When you went from, can you tell us a little bit about going from FedEx to starting and owning Lenny's franchise?
Well, I only had 2 jobs in my life, which is different than most people coming along today. So I worked in public accounting. I left there and went to work for FedEx. And I had been working, I think, what I consider pretty hard since I was 15. And I had was looking for a way to retire or to get out of the business. And FedEx came along with this first buyout ever. And I was eligible for it, and it just fit me at the time. And one of the reasons I had not probably retired from the company already is because I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I was always concerned about having health insurance in case the cancer came back. I mean, just a little anxious about that, as any cancer survivor would be. And this buyout included post-retirement health that would bridge me to my retirement date and my retirement age. So everything just fit perfectly for me. And being at FedEx in the early stages, I had access to when the company went public, and quite a few financial rewards that because I knew what it was to be so very poor, I was pretty conservative with saving my money, investing bonuses and that kind of thing. So I was going to be able to retire and live okay. And I had no plans to do anything else but sit at Starbucks and watch other people go to work. And I did that for a while, but of course that got old. I did do a 6-month stint at my church as the media manager at a time that they needed some leadership there. Not that I know very much about the technical side of business. So, but one day I was sitting there at a Starbucks one Saturday morning, and I read that Len Moore, who was the original Lenny's of the business, had sold his business to George Alvord, someone I knew and respected. And I was reading about it, and I really wanted to be an investor, not a franchisee. So I made a call that Saturday morning, and George and I ended up talking the following weekend. We ended up buying a business in Oxford, Mississippi, which, as I mentioned, is my hometown. Right. I thought, oh, Oxford, love it there. I'll be back and forth. That will be the business to have. So we bought that one in Oxford. And then my family and I will kind of rewind a little bit. The way I first knew about Lenny's too was that my daughter, who's now Dr. Dana Kelly, was a student at Rhodes, and she brought the concept to my son and James, my son James. James was really the one who really wanted to do the entrepreneurial thing. He got his MBA from Florida A&M down in Tallahassee, and he wanted to be an entrepreneur, even though he worked in corporate America for a few years. So things just kind of lined up, and as I got to know more about Lenny's too, the culture there was very much in line with what I was interested in and had experienced at FedEx. So that's how I got into Lenny's. And the final reason was I wanted to leave some kind of legacy for my family so that no one in my family would have lack of finances as the reason not to go to college or not to go to trade school, that they would always be able to get an education. And then after that, they're on their own, but that they would be able to get educated, which I just feel so strongly is the basis for anything that anybody wants to do in their lives.
When you were starting your business and growing, is there anything that you look back now and think, gosh, I wish I'd done that differently? That mistakes maybe that you made, or just things that you wish you'd handled in a different manner?
Well, let's start with making that first purchase down in Oxford, Mississippi. That was an emotional attachment. That was my hometown. Oxford's only an hour's drive away, but a lot of things can get in the way of going back and forth down to Oxford. And in this kind of business, where you have quite a bit of employee turnover, you're dealing with cash. If you own that business, you need to be on the scenes. You need to be on point yourself. And so it got more challenging to drive back and forth to Oxford. And so I was delegating the leadership. We were delegating the leadership to a manager down there. And so that's one thing. And the second thing is holding on to businesses, becoming attached to businesses, and holding on to businesses beyond the time that you should divest of them. I think whenever you start a business, you need to have an exit plan on the front end. And once you hit that exit plan, you hit that milestone, actually do the exit. Because otherwise it's much, if you get attached to it, you want to keep the business and, keep the business, and because you love the business, because of you, not necessarily because it's fulfilling the goals that you've set on the front end.
Well, that's very tough to do, to know when to say when sometimes. But, I know that employees are what I often hear from the members of our Insights group that James is a part of, is that employees are the biggest challenge to business ownership. How did you find and retain and keep the best people?
Well, that is especially true right now as we're going through COVID and the things that we're going through now, and having to lay off employees, particularly in the restaurant business. But then once employees are laid off, they get the unemployment, and they are generally able to make as much, if not more, than they were making working part-time. Most of our employees are part-timers, so they're able to make more than they were on an hourly basis and not work. So that's really challenging right now. But in the past, in a normal kind of situation where you're finding employees, that is challenging too, because many look at what we do as, hey, just a stepping stone to something else, which really is what I want hourly part-time young employees to do, to look at it as either I might want to own a restaurant, I might want to manage one, but do not come and start working here and say, I'm going to be working as an hourly employee, 30 hours a week, making minimum wage or a little bit better for the rest of my life. So one of the keys is referrals from other employees, from other 18 employees. We just implemented something in one of our stores just recently where if an employee recommends someone, we hire them and they stay for 60 days, then that employee then gets a little bit of a bonus. But they have to stay 60 days, they have to work out. But turnover is one of the biggest things I think that an entrepreneur has to deal with in the restaurant business, maybe not so much, or in the service business, let's just say in the service business in general. We do advertise, we do interviews, we do reference checks, so you try your best to get the right person in, but that doesn't always work out. And not only just for restaurants, even in professional positions, as we know, particularly now with millennials, they change jobs fairly frequently. So that's from a finding perspective. And then once we get employees on, we do try and train them in the process. We give them second chances, which is one of the opportunities that we have as a small business, is that we can give our employees second chances that perhaps working at a FedEx or an international paper, you can't do. You can't do that. If you make a mistake this one time, the policy says you're out and you've got to be consistent. So we do give our employees second chances oftentimes, and oftentimes it doesn't work out that second time, but just as often as not, the employee proves themselves. But we really want to make sure that they're trained properly on the front end to do the position, do the job, and they understand what our philosophy is and what our values are. And that integrity is one of our highest values. And you can do some other things. You can maybe get a customer upset, but you cannot lie. You cannot steal. Those are absolutes.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in a business like that where cash is so easily at people's fingertips. One thing I know about you is that you do take your employees and oftentimes you look for ways that you can help kind of give them a leg up, help them in future things and invest more into them. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that you've helped some of them with some ownership? And
well, certainly with employees, and then in general, there are people who will want loans, want you to invest in their businesses. But I've found that if I don't know enough about it, I mean, there's good salespeople out there, but sometimes they don't have all the I's dotted and T's crossed. So when I got in the restaurant business, we had the opportunity to work with some of our employees and who stood out from the rest. And when we had opportunities to open new locations, particularly in the airport, we were able to allow those employees to be a part of those new locations with basically no investment on their part. Using our credit worthiness or my personal credit worthiness, we could get the loans if we needed loans, and we could pay that money back. And then once that's done, employees who didn't have thousands of dollars to invest were now part owners of those businesses, and were able to get rewarded for that based on the profitability of the company. Now, these employees also, if they're managers in the store, so they're hands-on, they're able to get a salary as well as to get that extra bump based on the performance of the business. And because they're owners, just like anybody who owns something, you're going to take better care of what you own than what you're renting or what you're leasing or what you just get paid to come to work for on a daily basis. So I think that's been helpful. Otherwise, these employees probably would not qualify loans, but may not ever have been able to be a part of their own business, own operation.
I love that. What advice would you give to somebody that came to you that said that they were thinking about starting a business?
Well, I look at F's, and there are 5, 6, 7 F's that I've kind of lived my life by, and I think it applies to starting businesses as well. F's are generally considered bad things if you're in school, but I look at them as a way to focus on the priorities in my life and kind of keep me on the straight and narrow. So first one is faith. I listened to Charles Ewing's broadcast, and he has his faith shown throughout how he was successful in his business, Ewing Moving. And I too think everybody has to be grounded in faith, grounded in something bigger than themselves, because things are going to go good sometimes. They're not going to go good, maybe more often than not, particularly early on. So you've got to have that grounding to make sure you're on point, that you know that there's a higher being looking out for you, because sometimes you just cannot control everything. Finances, second F that I look at, and these are not necessarily in any order of importance, except faith, I think, is your foundation. You've got to understand the numbers. You've got to understand the numbers, but you also got to understand, do you have the money to do this? Do you have access to funds? Because no matter what you plan, project in terms of your budget, and even with contingencies, chances are you will have forgotten something's gotten left out, or something's not going to go the way you thought it should go. So make sure you know where your finances are. You can get starry-eyed. I got a great idea, but you got to be able to make your payroll too if you have employees. You've also got to be able to make enough money to pay your own bills. So that's one. Friends and family. Are you going to need their support, and will they support you on this? Will they lend you money if you're going to need money? Are they going to expect you to give them a job? And then if you give them a job, can you work with them? And then on friends and family, entrepreneurship takes a lot of time. Time away from your family, perhaps. You're not going to be able to spend time with your kids. You might have to miss some special events. Are you able to give that up? And will your friends and family understand that when you go off on this duty, on this expedition that you're going to go on? Fitness for duty. Are you mentally and physically fit for duty? That to me means, can you put in the time? Can you burn the candle at both ends? Can you work 8 days a week? Because sometimes it takes that. And can you work at least half a day? And I quote Kevin Wilson's on that. It doesn't matter which half you work, just as long as you work at least 12 hours half the day, and sometimes more, oftentimes more. Again, are you willing to miss out on things that your friends and family are going to be doing that are going to be fun? So you got to assess, am I willing and able to do that? And right now, you're being tested during this COVID environment. We're being tested for this fit for duty. Do we have the stamina? Can we hang in there? Can we emotionally and mentally hang in there? And I read a lot about mental issues that people are having. You probably don't even have to worry about payroll for others, but worrying about themselves. I mean, this is a mental thing. And the last one that I'll mention is philanthropy. And although I know that doesn't start with an F, but phonetically, I think philanthropy, we can get an F out of that. But when you're starting your initiative, start it with a larger purpose in mind, not just to make a lot of money and put it in the bank and buy a sailboat and that kind of thing. How are you going to also make your community a better place to be? Is it because you're going to be giving jobs to people that might not be able to get jobs if it were not for you? Are you going to be making contributions? You're going to adopt a school? But just make sure you have another purpose to the philanthropic side of it, other than just purely making money, that you're giving back and you're supporting your community, that you make it in a better place to be.
That's great. I love your F's. That's a great answer. I do have some questions that I wanted to ask you. One is that Scott Morris has asked, is there anything that we can do to help African American businesses grow in Memphis? What would you have some recommendations or some insight?
I think there are a lot of things we can do and a lot of things people have tried to do. And I guess I would get back to one of my F's in terms of just focusing on, I would say, do 5 things really well and not 50 things poorly. So one thing I would just offer up is mentoring mentee, and I hate to use that, and I know it's used a lot in terms of that word, but what that means to me is taking a majority larger company, doing the same thing that a minority company is trying to do, and matching yourself with them, and as that larger company, bringing that smaller company along. And it might mean giving some contracts or making sure that person knows how to do a proposal to get a contract that maybe you wouldn't normally do, or a contract that you might just you might say no to because it's just just too small. So I think that opportunity there to bring someone into a business and let them learn a way to do the business, and you putting in some time with that smaller organization, and then sticking with that organization. And it's almost to the point I said, I'm not going to let you fail. You're not going to fail. You got to do this, this, and that. And that takes commitment on both sides of the house, and it takes compatibility. But I'm also a believer in just saving any situation, any person, any group one at a time. It's, to me, terribly hard to do it in mass or across the board. But if you can take one at a time, or you can take 10 large organizations and match them with smaller ones, and hopefully those smaller organizations and minority organizations then become larger ones and they pass it forward.
Wow, that's great. I appreciate it. Good answer. The other, we have a couple of other questions, and I think that a lot of people are thinking about the pandemic because we're in a very surreal time right now. So a couple of my questions are specifically about that we've gotten from the participants. One is, when do you think people will be comfortable eating out again?
You know, I really don't know in terms of going to a sit-down restaurant. For me, I can't see that happening before the end of the year. It's one thing to go into a place, but everybody's got masks and you can't eat without you taking your mask out. That's a little scary to me. And I think a lot of us have found that while we don't have maybe the ambiance of being in a specific restaurant, our favorite restaurant, we still can get the taste. We can still get the food because almost all restaurants are doing carry-out, delivery, or curbside. So I don't know the answer to that. I wish for sooner than later, but I think it's going to be every individual's level of comfortableness with going out and about, and it also it's going to deal with how we take on the responsibility ourselves. I mean, there's still so many folks out without masks, or people are talking to you and they'll just kind of walk right up on you, and some of it I think they just probably unaware, but also some of it is they don't care, and it's my responsibility to be concerned about you and vice versa. But if you're not concerned about me, and I don't trust that you are, I think I'm going to stay closer to home than not and learn how to cook more than I have already. But I don't see myself being comfortable with this before the end of the calendar year.
Well, one of the things that we haven't mentioned before, well, I guess we did because you went to school there, but I know you're very involved with Ole Miss. So one of the questions from Duncan Williams is, what do you see because of the pandemic? What do you think about higher education or education in general? What do you think is going to be out there for the future?
I think we're talking about referencing virtual learning, and I think you're going to see more of that. I've always been a proponent of that anyway, because we have so many people who work full time, who are trying to get an education, and I have several friends who've gotten MBAs that way. Unfortunately, for someone coming out of high school, they may end up missing a lot of that on-campus experience and quote fun that they're expecting with the college life. So I think you're going to see some downsizing of people actually on campus. I think there'll also be opportunities. People look at opportunities. Hey, we don't have to build another building, a bigger building. We've got this building. We're not getting funding, and particularly at Ole Miss, I know that each year the funding from taxes from the state gets lower and lower. This allows, in my opinion, a way to educate masses without having to bring on more bricks and mortar. I think we'll get used to it. We've gotten used to a lot of things that I think we rejected early on. I reflect back to my days of email when we started going to email and nobody wanted to do email. But we get used to it, and now we can't remember the times without that. And I think virtual learning opens up so many opportunities. So that's what I'm thinking. I think you'll see a growth in virtual learning, as well as with companies and how they do business and who comes to work and how much work can be done at home. And I guess if there are positives in any situation, in my opinion, one of the ones I see here is we've been forced to experiment in areas where we probably wouldn't have gotten there 5 years, 10 years from now. And all of a sudden we've had to do it, and we find out some of the things we're having to do, hey, it's not so bad.
What I love about you, Edith, is that you're always looking for the silver lining. So, and that you're very creative. And so I kind of want to go back to one of the things that you were talking about when you were talking about your F's, is philanthropy. And I know that you've been involved with getting a group together to do philanthropic deeds. Can you talk about that some?
Sure, but first I'm gonna just hold on. You say I'm creative. I love that. I want everybody to know I'm an accountant. I'm a CPA, and she just called an accountant a creative person, which is not normally the adjective we get to go with that profession. But I think you're referencing, in terms of your question, the philanthropic Black women in Memphis, and this is just a simple concept. In 2007, there were 9 of us. Just talking at one time, 9 people who do philanthropic kinds of activities as well as giving in our Memphis community. And we thought, why don't we just pool some portion? It's not even probably, I think would probably be incremental giving. Why don't we pool some funds? And each year we do some grants, and the grants are $5,000 or less. And I know that sounds like a small amount. It is a small amount to many, but that makes all the difference in the world to some nonprofits who have a project. For example, Alzheimer's, we funded a project that they had on their table for the not the patients, but the caregivers, and just a big event for them. And you know, you'll hear caregivers are the ones that really, you know, they're forgotten, but it really takes a toll. So we never know when $5,000 is going to make all the difference in the world to someone. And so we've done several grants. Maybe over time. We don't do it every year, but we generally do it on average every year and a half or so. And we take applications, and we do vet them, and we make selections, and we give grants to people, to organizations that will help them hopefully either stay in business or do something, a project that's going to make a difference for them and certainly help the community. Just in the last month, while we didn't do grants, we gave $2,500 each to Christ Community Health, and we also gave $2,500 to the food bank, just knowing that there's so many in our community that are having issues with food. They never thought they would be there, but they're having to, you know, go to places to, you know, to get food, get health care. So that was something we could easily do by writing a check with no vetting, just do it. So we were happy I think we were all happy to be a part of that, and I know we've also all given individually in that case too.
That's amazing. I love that. Sometimes bringing everybody together just creates even more. So that's wonderful. I'm going to ask one more question that we've gotten from one of the participants. Derek at Career Quo wants to know, what kind of businesses are you looking to invest in now with the current environment and in your future?
Well, Zoom for one. I think that's what we're using right now, right? I wish I had a while back, of course.
Me too.
I think there are going to be new businesses that are born out of this, like delivery companies. As we just talked about in restaurants, people are going to look to have things delivered to them. I assure you, I am doing more online ordering myself of things just like shampoo and conditioner, which I would have just gone to the store to get. So I think you're going to have some new things that come up, but even some of the staples, you know, just things that when you're at home, this is what you want. Coke, Kellogg, for example. I don't have to mention specific names, and nobody should go out and do that based on what I say. In fact, you should do just the opposite. But I know things that I'm eating now, or things that I'm doing now, even Netflix. At one point, there's a projection Netflix, oh, they're going to be overtaken by Apple, by Disney, by all of the others that are out there. But if you look at Netflix stock now, it's just booming. But so are the others. But I also think there are going to probably be some new ideas that come up as a result. So I think with people working at home, there are going to be some ideas that come up relative to how do you make working at home more comfortable, perhaps ergonomic chairs or ergonomic desks. And I think companies are going to be providing that, while they say, okay, it's great to work at home, but I think they're going to also have to provide some of the tools beyond, you know, laptops and whatever else. It could be a certain type of lamp that's going to make working at home better, because there are going to be issues that have come up from working at home too. And I think there'll be emotional kind of stimulations, stimulated kind of things that have to happen for somebody sitting at home. So I don't really have firm ideas on that, but I think if you just think, well, gosh, if I'm working at home, what do I need? What I want that's going to be different? And I think there will be companies that will be coming up with that all the time. And then there's always the companies that are trying to invent these vaccines. If you know which one's going to do it first, that would be the place to be. Of course, we don't know. So I think there are opportunities out there, but I don't have a list of top 10.
That's very interesting. Well, just in closing, I want to ask you a question that I love to ask everybody, and that is, what would somebody be surprised to know about you?
Well, one is that I'm an introvert, and I'm a shy person. I always have been. The position that I had at FedEx required that I not be, so you rise to the occasion. It was kind of something you had to do to be in that position. Now, Pearson, nobody would have said that about you, right?
Not
okay,
many.
you don't
No.
claim to be. Okay, and not that I claim to be, but I am. I'm okay being a loner for the most part. The other thing is I have a great sense of humor. I think people tend to think of me as serious Sally most of the time, but hey, I have a great sense of humor, and I like to have fun. And then probably the last thing, I think many people know, most of my friends and over the years know that I'm an avid runner. I've run a half marathon in all 50 states, and as well as 3 or 4 continents. Most recently down in Antarctica and South America back in January. And by the way, Antarctica is the safest place to be in the world now because there are no COVID cases going on down there. Not that I would want to be there because they're going into winter right now. So I started running within the last 12 years at an old age. So you're never too old to do that.
That's awesome. Well, I sure appreciate you taking the time today, Edith, to talk with us on Zoom. We're all doing things a little bit differently now. So
Right.
Our next meeting is going to be on June the 18th. We're hoping that we're going to be with Lee Mansburg at Junior Achievement, but who knows? We might be on Zoom. We're going to let people a lot smarter than me let us know what we need to be doing about that time. So again, I just want to thank my sponsors, eBiz. Thanks again for hosting this for us today. Paragon Bank, and behind the scenes, we appreciate all of their support. And thanks again. We really appreciate it, and have a great day.